Podcasting from beautiful Leesburg, Virginia. Welcome to the Music Educator podcast, bringing you the latest tips, tricks, and practical advice you can use tomorrow. Here's your host and fellow music educator, Bill Stevens.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Music Educator podcast. My name is Bill Stevens. I'll be your host for today, and thank you for joining us. In today's episode, Season 4, Episode 21, we're going to talk about full band intonation improvement teaching strategies. Let's do this. Full band intonation improvement teaching strategies are always something that I look forward to whenever I need inspiration to get my group to the next level before a performance. Now, as a middle school band director, I know that one size certainly does not fit all, and I wanted to share a few techniques and strategies that have worked for me in my teaching. Full band singing exercises. I have said this before, and I'll say it again. Singing helps instrumental musicians improve their abilities in a variety of ways. As a fellow music educator, I'm sure you may be able to relate to this. Often you will find that band students who are also in choir tend to be more sensitive to intonation efforts and are better at tuning their instruments than others in the group. If you consider what choirs often work on to make their performance beautiful, there is a hyper focus on phrasing, tone quality, interval accuracy, and much, much more. All of these elements are needed for great instrumental performances. However, many music educators find themselves knee-deep in the mechanics of the music rather than the big picture musicianship of the desired end result. Therefore, it makes perfect sense to incorporate singing into our rehearsals. In this podcast, we're going to be focusing on technique to help you, as the music educator and musician, to improve the intonation of your group in a large ensemble setting. These would include using the audible tuning pitch and humming the pitch before playing, and isolating specific notes, or in some cases chords, and sequentially playing it, singing it, playing it. Using a drone. Using this singing technique, be sure to have either a pitch-specific tuning device, synthesizer, or a stable tenor instrument sound, such as a bassoon, to sustain a B-flat drone. Then, number 1, have students hum the pitch of the drone that is playing while at the same time plugging one ear with their free hand. This action naturally amplifies the internal hearing and allows the musician to better hear the difference between the voice and the drone. Number 2, the next step is to have the student musician play the same pitch on their instrument. This is done while still plugging his or her ear with their free hand. Again, the student musician's internal hearing is transferred through the bones of the player, thus being able to more noticeably hear the need for making adjustments to the pitch or be able to confidently assure themselves that they are balancing with the ensemble. Techniques to improve large ensemble intonation. We'll start with pitch bending. One popular technique for improving large ensemble intonation is to actually practice pitch bending exercises. As a result of this activity, groups can help center their pitch more accurately. Now, my recommendation is to start this activity by establishing a series of hand signals or perhaps cues to represent in tune, out of tune, and unison. Now, remind your students that no matter how they manipulate their sound, they must always play with their personal best tone. Practice having students bend their pitch up and down as a group, and then end the experience with the musicians settling on a sustained unison. As students become more focused on the listening component of this exercise, the improvements with the unison playing will become quite noticeable. Mouthpiece buzzing. Mouthpiece buzzing is known to help brass players improve their intonation and tone quality. A careful word of caution, though, is to limit mouthpiece buzzing from about 2 to 5 minutes and avoid exercising using it in the extreme high and low registers. To start, introduce mouthpiece buzz in a comfortable and acceptable way. Some may find that the sheer sound of the buzz is funny, and without monitoring the reactions of your students, this activity can quickly get out of hand. Number 2, next, have the brass players buzz while the woodwind players play something relatively simple. Example of this can include chunks of their performance music, a call and response music exercise, and even alternating melodic solos between players while always listening in order to match pitch. Over time, add games that can incorporate buzzing exercises or even sight reading in small chunks through programs such as Smart Music, Sight Reading Factory, or Rhythm Randomizer. Buzzing exercises should always model good posture and appropriate breathing technique. Invoking parallelism to improve intonation. There are definite benefits to using parallelism to improve intonation in your band rehearsals. With these activities, students will play two different scales simultaneously. The scales should either be a fourth or fifth apart from each other. For example, B-flat concert scale and E-flat concert scale, or B-flat concert scale and F concert scale. Consider using a combination of scales that represent the key of one of your performance pieces. Start this exercise by sustaining the open fourth/fifth with the ensemble split in half. Take the time to have each half of the band tune the unison given the starting pitch. Next, have both groups play together the initial open interval. In other words, the first note of each scale. Before playing up and down the scale, make sure to eliminate the beats that may be heard. Next, have each group play their assigned scales separately from the other group. Finally, have both groups play their separate scales together, ascending and descending. This will create a series of parallel fourth and fifth intervals. Have students focus on listening to this open sound and provide guidance for what to do if it sounds wrong. Now, from my experience, students enjoy using parallelism. Consider using this exercise beyond the scale example provided. Another recommendation for using parallelism, especially with the fifths, would include teaching your students just a very simple melody by rote, and then have the students learn to play the melody in two keys that creates a parallel fifth movement. Practice this and activate their critical listening skills. Ideas about tuning. Often, your winds that are in orchestras tune using an oboe player as its point of reference. However, in the band world, it is not wise to tune to a specific instrument because he or she plays it. This can cause a variety of issues if the person requested to provide a pitch center is someone struggling with timbre or pitch stability in the first place. Often directors will have a favorite instrument to tune to, but consider the following when making this your selection. Is the selected musician an advanced player with a stable pitch? Have you experimented with several tuning sources and compared the results of each? Ultimately, a well-trained ear will produce the best results in your band ensemble. What pitch do I tune to? Over the years, I've heard ensembles approach tuning in different ways. One question that might be asked is that what note should I actually tune the band to? Some bands tune to notes such as B-flat, A, and or maybe F. Rather than tuning just to one note, perhaps consider tuning to each one and understand the limitations each note has based upon your band's instrumentation. Concert P-flat is a great note to tune to for most brass instruments. With the exception of the horn, all brass instruments use an open fingering, or first position in the case of the trombone, which serves to tune the full length of the instrument's tuning slide. In addition, woodwind pitch centers are generally stable on this note. As a result, concert B-flat tuning works well for the full band setting. Now, using concert A for woodwind instruments is a stable note and for anyone lucky enough to have a double bass player in their band. Concert A is used in symphony orchestras, and woodwind players in these groups feel confident that they are centered on their pitch. Brass instruments must finger something different than their open valves or first slide position. This is for the most part second valve or second position. As a result, this leads to a slightly less stable pitch center. Once again, concert F is a favorite pitch for tuning brass instruments since it uses open fingerings for valve instruments and is in first position for trombone and is a stable note for the F horn. In addition, many great warm-up exercises are written in concert F major. However, the intonation challenges with woodwind instruments include, for flutes, often play flat on low F, slightly flat on the top line F, and noticeably sharp on high F. Oboe musicians have different pitch tendencies for each of the F fingerings. For E-flat saxophones, the intonation for fourth line D is noticeably sharp without adjustments. Bassoons often experience factors of instability in concert F. And finally, with the exception of F horn, most brass instruments, each concert F becomes more sharp starting from the third partial up. Based on these factors, it is wise to consider your student musicians' abilities as they tune in your ensemble. Recommended tuning for full band. Consider using the following recommendations when tuning your full band. Start with a slow, sustained process where you begin with concert B flat, then should go to A concert, and then F concert. Use these successive steps. First, tune concert B flat together as a full band. Then move to concert A. In this step, brass players need to check their second valve and second position tuning. Number 3, move to concert F. Clarinetists need to check their second line G. E-flat saxophones need to check for flattening the fourth line D, and brass check for sharpness. Finally, repeat this process one or more times. The tuning requires to check open tuning of student musicians. Start by having half the students hold concert B flat and others hold concert F. This serves as a group drone process. Have each group play 4 ascending notes while sustaining a tetrachord. This next recommendation is called tuning from principles. Start this tuning process by first tuning all first chair musicians. These should be the most advanced players in the ensemble. These players will then sound the appropriate tuning tone. In small increments, the music educator will add successive players into the group. As new players are guided into playing the tuning pitch, it is their responsibility to eliminate the beats. The goal is to create a beatless unison from the entire group. The final tuning exercise is called Pass the Sound. In this exercise, students will play individually or in small groups. Starting with the lowest instrument in the ensemble, students will pass a specific pitch throughout the band. While this is done, student musicians will be working to match their tuning, tone, and intensity of the musician that played before them. Variations include, number 1, one individual plays the pitch and then a second joins them. The second individual then tunes to a unison and works for beatless sound. Then a third player starts to play. When this begins, the first player stops playing and the objective is the same as before. Ultimately, there is always 2 musicians playing to create a beatless sound. And the second variation includes the band playing in unison and each section plays by itself. This is done for 4 to 8 counts at a time. The band once again plays in unison and then the next section plays by itself. This will go back and forth between band and section until all groups have played. Conclusion. In conclusion, there are many variations, techniques, and strategies to improving a band's intonation. The major component required in the development of a young musician's ability is to have them use their well-trained ear. As a music educator, it would be wise to learn about and experiment with every intonation and tuning improvement strategy you can. With time, you will learn what works for you and your band. This will help your program develop a custom sound that audiences will look forward to hearing year in and year out. I want to thank you again for joining me for another episode of the Music Educator podcast. It is an absolute true pleasure to share this craft with lovers of music and educators like you. If you found value in today's episode, please feel free to leave a review and rate us on the Music Educator podcast app, Apple Podcasts, or any other podcast aggregator. Also, please consider supporting the show by becoming an official Music Educator podcast member or advertise with us on the podcast. Information for this can be found in the show notes. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you join us next time. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Music Educator podcast. For the latest tips, tricks, and practical advice you can use tomorrow. You can subscribe to our podcast on every podcast aggregator or download the Music Educator app for free in the Apple or Google Play app stores. Furthermore, visit our blog at www.bandbuzz.org for additional music education resources. We will see you on the next episode of the Music Educator podcast. And remember, music can change the world.
This is Bill Stevens from the Music Educator podcast. Have you ever considered starting your own podcast? Well, see this episode's show notes for our unique promo code from the Music Educator podcast to get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn. Get your show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify anywhere you want. Get critical stats to help you grow, find all the tools and support you need to sound your very best. You can even do video. Really bring your podcast to life with Libsyn. See the show notes for our unique Libsyn promo code and get podcasting.